This is Ask Joe number 191. Hey, this is Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to those of you who are joining me live. And if you've never joined me live, you are missing out because we have a lot of fun. Tuesdays, 1 p.m. Sorry I missed you last week. Had an illness in the family. My wife was sick, so I was on kid duty and just couldn't make it work with pickup times and all that. And also getting ready to go to NAMM, which was super fun. So I'm glad to be back. Glad to be back in the old saddle and excited to do another episode. So thank you to everyone who's here live. If you'd like to be reminded every week when I'm going live, you can follow me on Facebook, Joe Gilder Music. You can also sign up for the calendar, and your phone will pop up just like mine just did and say, Ask Joe Gilder Live is happening. Just go to homestudiocorner.com/calendar, and you'll get annoying reminders from me every Tuesday if you want to come to the live show. All right, so do a quick NAMM follow-up because that's kind of fun. This is my first time, actually, as ashamed as I am to say it, my first time going out to Winter NAMM out in Anaheim, California. They do it every January, and I've been to Summer NAMM here in Nashville, but never to Winter NAMM. So it was good. NAMM stands for National Association of Music Merchants. It's just a big trade show where all the manufacturers come out, and there's lots of celebrities. I got to see Pensato's place live a few times. They interviewed Jimmy Douglas. Jerry Douglas is the musician, and Butch Vig, and then a couple of guys from Maroon 5. So that was all pretty fun to watch. Got to see a talk by Kenny Aronoff, the legendary drummer, who is a beast and is still touring and playing like crazy. He's played on something like the equivalent of 300 million. There's total album sales of stuff he's played on is like 300 million, which is insane. So he was pretty funny to listen to. He was pretty entertaining as well. And, of course, I got to hang out with Graham Cochran, which is always good, and got to meet some new friends. I met Björgvin Benediktsson for the first time from audioissues.com, and then met a couple of new friends, some folks that I'd met before that I got to hang out with. I got to meet, who else? Jason Moss, and I totally just blanked. I've got so many names in my head. And now I'm embarrassed because I blanked. His website is homestudiocenter.com, and please, I hope he doesn't watch this because I just totally, completely blanked on his name. We hung out, actually, for a long time. I am super embarrassed right now. Do you ever do that? You go to say, it's Rob Mazes. I knew it was Rob. I'm sorry. I was thinking you're British, and I was nervous. Anyway, so Rob and I and Graham and Jason and my buddy Sam, who lives out in L.A., is an engineer out there. We all hung out quite a bit, got to go get chicken and waffles together. But Rob, accept my apologies. I'm sorry. Part of me wants to go back and re-record this. But as you know, I don't like to edit myself because mistakes are a part of the deal, whether you're making music or a podcast. And I like to sometimes leave them in because it's just real, you know? So Rob, I blanked on your name. Deepest apologies. I'll make it up to you somehow. Actually, Rob interviewed me recently for a charity kind of giveaway, not giveaway, but a kind of an event, a series of interviews with lots of different people that's coming up in February, I believe. So if you're on my email list, you'll hear about that. But we talked a lot about lots of different stuff, and he's got a lot of other cool interviews lined up. So I'm excited to get to see more of those. Rob's a cool guy. All right, so a couple of things. What else from NAMM? I hung out at the PreSonus booth quite a bit. Got to meet a lot of you folks, those of you who made it. It was good to see a lot of faces and put a lot of names to faces and things like that. I don't have a lot to report on as far as gear. I don't really go for the equipment. There were plenty of booths I didn't even go to that I would have probably liked to, but just never did. For example, PreSonus has their Faderport 8, which is cool looking. Don't know if I'd ever get one. I dig my PreSonus 1 right there. Right, where is it? I can't even direct myself. Right here with the 1 fader. I use that a lot. I don't know if I would use 8 faders. I'd probably find a way to use them, but Probably not on the docket for me, but I had a lot of a lot of fun checking out a lot of the people who were talking, connecting with people, hearing engineers talk. Got me fired up to come back and make music. Working on a few songs this morning, actually. So I'm excited about that as well. And Paul, I was at the Hybrid Studios party. I'm sorry we missed each other. I showed up a little bit later, but I was there from probably 9 o'clock till 11 or so. Hate that I missed you. We'll do it next time. All right, so that's it for the intro part of this podcast. I don't really have anything to rant about. I've got some ideas and things that I want to I'll probably do in future episodes. I do have a couple new things content-wise. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, you should check it out. I've been doing some more songwriting videos, kind of behind the scenes, me writing a song start to finish on camera, which is super nerve-wracking and awesome. And I just started last week a new series of videos called 2-Minute Tips, where if you want just a quick hit of Joe, any advice and quick things all under 2 minutes, I'll be adding more and more to those over the next several months. So that's about all in the way of announcements. I'd rather just jump in and get to your questions if that's okay with you. So here comes the scary music. Boom. So Lakshay says he saw me on the Pensado's Place Instagram story. That's exciting. I didn't know I was on the Instagram story. But yeah, I actually made it to all the Pensado's Place. They were doing a Pensado's Place live at the Avid booth. So that was fun. All right, so let's jump into your questions. I'm going to grab a couple of the Facebook questions, and I'll come back to the live chat. Excuse me, and answer your questions as well. Rob, who I believe is here on the chat as well, has a cool question. I read this earlier. He says, I'm starting a new band project, and we recorded some tunes, and my drummer is a much more accomplished mix engineer than I am, so I decided to have him do the mixing, but I would watch and assist and learn. Interestingly enough, he saw him normalizing the audio tracks before beginning the static mix. I asked him about it, and he said that all the processing plugins like to see around negative 18 dB peak signal, so he normalizes every track to negative 18 dB before starting to mix. I've never heard of this, but I must say his results are very good. However, I'm not sure if that's because of the normalizing in spite of it, or whether it's completely irrelevant to the end result. What are your thoughts? Well, Rob, if you haven't listened to the Simply Recording podcast that I do with Graham, we talk about this pretty regularly there and a lot on the Dueling Mixes coaching calls, but it's a thing called gain staging. I'm not a big gain staging guy. I just don't see the point. I think, yes, some plugins maybe were designed to have a certain level that they sound best. For me, I use the stock plugins mostly, and I don't think it applies to those as much to like the SSL channel strips and things like that. For me, the biggest thing you can do in gain staging is just not having everything too loud, so you start clipping things. That's all I care about. So when I get tracks that are too loud, I bring them down. For me, I don't want to really get into it. I think to answer your question, I think if you want to go the gain staging route and be very scientific about getting it at negative 18 dB peaks and stuff like that, I say go for it. But don't get bogged down. That's not why his mixes sound good, to answer your question. His mixes sound good because he has good ears and he knows how to use the tools to get good mixes. Whether you normalize your tracks or not, I don't think that's going to make or break your mixes. I just don't. This hasn't been the case in my experience. Thomas says, I'm mostly doing live recording of jazz bands. What's the best tip for avoiding too much bleed, especially from the double bass mic? The pickup mic attached to some basses have too little high end, so an extra mic is required. Thanks. Well, I mean, as far as avoiding bleed, when you're doing live recording in a perfect world, every instrument would be in its own isolated room, and you could mic it however you wanted and not have to worry about bleed. Or you record everything one thing at a time in an overdub fashion, right? And that's how you do the whole project. So there's no bleed there. The problem, of course, especially in the jazz world, is musicians tend to want to play together, and they're usually not playing to a click, and they want to speed up and slow down and do their thing together, which is kind of the whole point, right? We've gone a long way from the old days where everyone had to play at the same time because all we had were mono or stereo recorders, and there wasn't multi-track recording. So everyone had to learn to play and sing and blend together to record down to one thing, which I think would be a fantastic challenge, by the way, to get a full band together and have them record down to 2-track, and that's it. No overdubbing. I'm gonna have to do that. The other thing is obviously just there's something about playing together. Probably going to get a better performance that way. So bleed is one of the obvious downsides of that. Now, when you say recording live, you may mean actual live performances, which of course they're all going to play together. So in those situations, for me, there's usually a trade-off somewhere, right? For me, I usually err on the side of getting the mic a little bit closer to the source than maybe I normally would to help cut back on some of the bleed. So, for example, when I record, this isn't exactly related, but it demonstrates my point. When I'm recording myself playing acoustic guitar and singing, I've tried it a lot of different ways, and the way I keep coming back to is to have a vocal mic that is positioned down below my mouth, pointing up towards my mouth, because I kind of look down a little bit when I sing anyway. And then a mic on the guitar that is positioned a little bit above the guitar, pointing down towards the guitar. So that means that the guitar mic is pointed away from my voice and the vocal mic is pointed away from the guitar. Is there still bleed? Yes, but it's shocking to me. I mean, when I sit and play, my guitar is only a few inches away from my vocal mic, but by positioning them as directional microphones, in that way, I get a good amount of separation. So then I can do some compression on the vocal without it bringing out too much bleed in the guitar and things like that. So getting the source as close as you can within reason is probably going to help. Otherwise, bigger picture is I don't know if bleed is as big of a deal as we think it is. Right? So if you've, especially on something like an upright bass, if you're just using the microphone to get extra low end, then you probably don't need to use any extra compression on it. If you want to compress something, heavily compress the pickup, which has no bleed, to get the snap maybe that you want, and then use that other mic to just bring in the low end. For me, bleed can be a beautiful thing. If anything, if you've been on a session where somebody goes in and cuts out in the drums, they cut out all the sections of the tom tracks where there's bleed because they solo the tom and they hear the snare and the cymbals and they think that's not good, so I need to get rid of it. Sometimes that works, but a lot of times it can make the drums sound pretty lifeless and pretty sterile, especially if you're doing just rock stuff. So for me, I'm not saying if you cut out the silence, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just an example. But I've had plenty of times where leaving that sound in is a part of the feel of the song. And so some of that bleed, I would say, use to your advantage. Of course, there's challenges there, and you can minimize it a little bit with mic placement, but I wouldn't be too concerned with that. That can become, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Thomas, but it can become one of those things we obsess about that doesn't matter. So just be careful that doesn't happen. Brett Conroy asks, do you record practice sessions, whether it be full band or just yourself? I landed a gig playing with a band, and I'm thinking about recording rehearsals so we have an outside ear, so to speak. Sure, I've recorded rehearsals before. I went through a phase where I would actually set up a vocal mic, guitar, had in-ears, and would sing and play and record it and play along with the backing tracks from my EP and my album just as a rehearsal practice. The biggest reason I did that was to listen back to my playing and singing and to hear where I could improve. I tend to sing and play worse when I do both of them together. I also tend to speed up and slow down and tend to have pitch issues. So by specifically focusing on those, I was able to improve a little bit. It's easier when you can listen back even just quickly and you hear, oh, I keep messing up in that one spot, or I keep singing that one word flat, or I keep speeding up during that one section, and you become more aware of it, so the next time you play it, you're a little more likely to fix it. So yeah, I think recording, I've done full band rehearsals where we've recorded it. If you can do it, I think it never hurts, because what if you capture something awesome that could turn into like something you could release as a single when you guys goofed around playing Hey Joe from Jimi Hendrix and it turned out really cool. You know, those kind of magic moments, it's nice to capture them. But at the same time, I wouldn't burden yourself to where you're so focused on recording the rehearsal that you don't actually have a good rehearsal. Obviously know what the main purpose of it is, and if you can tack on some recording to it, I say go for it. Bill says, I can't attend live, but I have a question. I want to use an external hard drive. Once I plug it into my PC, how do I use it? I've never used one before. Cool. Well, Bill, you're probably referring to, if you go look at my 12 Home Studio Necessities video series, I talk a lot about, one of the things I talk about is using external hard drives, which is still, especially using laptops, but just in general, using a separate drive as your recording drive is good practice because there's just too much work for one drive to do everything. So have one drive that just streams the audio while the other drive runs your operating system. The way you do it is simple. It literally will show up as a place to save and store files, and that's it. When you start a new song, in the start, whatever DAW you're using, when you go to create a new song, a new project, a new file, whatever they call it, it asks where you want to save it to. You just pick that hard drive instead of your normal system drive on your computer. It's really that easy. And if you want to copy existing files over to that drive and then open them from there, you can do that as well. But it's literally, there's no complicatedness to it at all. Here's one from Romo Drummer. How do you back up your client projects? Do you use any cloud services or just good old hard drives? Because hard drives do fail. Just curious if you use any alternatives. That's a good question. I'm not great at backup, and it has not bit me like I'm sure it will one day. For me, I do back everything up to a second drive that's just here at my computer, and that's about it. Now, when I deliver the final mixes or the final masters or whatever I'm delivering to the client, I give it to them in Dropbox. So Dropbox has a copy of the final masters always. So that's on my computer, but also on the cloud. But I don't do full backups of everything. I probably should. Like, for example, a knock on wood, the stuff that I'm working on right now has only been backed up to the drive that's sitting here. So if, God forbid, my studio burns down, I lose that. So that makes me think I should put it somewhere else. So, cloud backup, probably a good idea. And you can get, I don't have any recommendations as far as those. It's making me think I should probably I've got plenty of room on my Dropbox account. So I've used 15% of my 2 terabyte limit. So I should probably do some backing up there. I haven't gotten into Time Machine and all those different things, but that's just me. So there you go. Don't do as I do. Question, do you deliver the full session to the client if he asks for it? If they ask for it, but they never do. Usually they're not in Studio One, so it's kind of pointless anyway. So let's see, looking for more questions. Brian says, I have a guy who's a really good country singer or country guitar /singer, but he can't play to a click. We were going to use Easy Drummer for the drums. What can I do to get his best performance but in time? Well, if he can't play to a click, I bet he can play to drums. So put together a drum loop and have him play to that. If he can't play to that, then he's going to have to learn how to do that. And you may need to postpone the session and have him practice. If he is a really good musician, he needs to be able to play with musicians, then keep time. And that's just a given. Now, that doesn't mean maybe he really can't play to a click, and that's okay. He should practice that as well. But playing to a click and playing to maybe a drum loop, those are two different things. And I think if you can get him to, a lot of times it's a little easier to play to a loop than it is to play to a click. So program a simple loop that's in roughly the feel of the song, and then you should be able to, hopefully he'll have a better time with that. But you got to be able to have the hard conversations of, if he can't play to that, then it's time to do something else. I don't know what, but to figure out some other solution. And, at the end of the day, if it works better without a click and to have a real drummer, that's great. But especially if you're using Easy Drummer, then there's really no choice. He has to record to some sort of a timed thing. Ron says, what is your take on DSP accelerated plugins within mixing? Do you run out of processing power during the mix that will warrant them? I'm a bad person to ask because I just use all stock plugins and I never run out of power because they're pretty efficient. But I know people who use lots of, especially if you're using big console emulation things or big reverbs, or you're using something that you use on every single track, it can bog things down. That's kind of why those hardware accelerators exist. At the same time, Graham Cochran was just talking about recently, he switched out the hard drives in his computer to solid state drives and can get way more plugins in his system because of that. So the processor being faster because it's solid state drives pull quicker than a physical platter drive kind of thing. So I don't know. I don't have much else to say on them because I don't use them. So there you go. Alan says, what do you think about the idea I proposed about recording the guitar and vocal part and then letting us arrange it to our heart's content? You were talking about, during that songwriting session I did, I guess. Yeah, I think those things are cool. I just have lots of things I'm working on right now. Keep reminding me though, and maybe I'll get around to doing that. The problem with something like that is if a bunch of people want me to listen to what they did, that's just not feasible. So I want to make sure I don't set it up as, hey, I'll listen to all your songs, and then there's 1,000 songs and I would never ever be able to listen to them all. That said, though, Alan, if you're wanting to play along to any of my songs, anything I've released, if you are a mix practice customer, homestudiocorner.com/practice, all the multi-tracks for all my albums are there. So you could pull those down, get rid of the drum tracks, and play drums along to them or whatever your instrument is, which is what some people do. They use them for mix practice, but sometimes they use them for practicing and recording as well, which is a fun idea I never thought of, but some people do it, and it's super cool. Ari Hunt says, can you suggest some cheap budget DIY acoustic treatment and sound isolation to block and even out the frequencies? You know, I just saw a company I used to work for. They've started working with a company called, I can't even remember, Son Acoustics or something. I'm trying to find it. I can't even remember the name of it. Of course, now I want to look it up. I mean, RLX makes good stuff. I mean, really anybody who makes this stuff is good. Proso Acoustic is the name of the company. Proso Acoustic. They're based out of Ohio, but they make really cool stuff. I saw some of it at the NAMM show. I'm probably going to get some for my studio, especially that back room. I would say don't get too caught up in soundproofing anything, because to soundproof something is a whole different thing than just treating your room to make the frequencies even out. To soundproof things, you've got to go down to the construction level. And a lot of people think if they just cover their walls with foam and play their electric guitar loud, the person in the next room won't be able to hear it. That's not how it works. There's a lot more to it if you want to actually do isolation versus just treating the room. What's the difference between instrument level and line level? Is there any? Usually instrument level is a lot quieter than line level. Otherwise, you'll have to talk to someone else who knows more about electronics. Doodle-doo. All right, they're talking about acoustic treatment. Let me go see if there's more questions up here. This is from Not David. Says, the only microphone that I currently have is literally my laptop's mic. Do you suggest I should start mixing using it and fixing the sound, or wait until I have a decent one? You know, I'm not one to say to hold off. I think you should be making music with whatever you have. I will say there's no fixing that, most likely. Okay, first of all, I recorded a song on my phone a couple years ago. Using just the phone's built-in microphone. It was a challenge I did for my VIP members, and recorded acoustic guitar and some vocals, and it turned out kind of cool. I mean, it's not an amazing recording, but it's kind of interesting. So in that sense, you can get a great recording anywhere if you get a good performance. But I will say, if you're just using the built-in microphone on your laptop, you're not going to get anything very good. So I would say make that top priority, get a good mic. I mean, that's it's just like saying I can put some rubber bands on a piece of wood and it sounds kind of like a guitar. Do you think I could be a great guitar player that way? Well, no, you're going to need an actual guitar at some point. For you, if you're wanting to do this, then you probably need to save up and get a microphone at some point. See if there are any other questions here. Y'all are being a little quiet. Here we go. Ladraz says, any advice on how to get your music to the radio? Question, should you release a song online before the radio or the next way around? You know, I've had one song on the radio locally here in Nashville. And for me, it was because the guy, I had connections. I knew the guy, and then he was a fan of Home Studio Corner, and then listened to my music and liked it. And that was it. Yeah, so I don't have much advice. I will say you should have, if you're going to have a particular thing happen that gets you some exposure to more people, it's a good idea to have something for them to buy once you're on there, or at least a way to find you and follow you or whatever. So I would say putting something on the radio when no one can go find you seems a little pointless, because radio is just a big promotional material. So I would say, yeah, have all your stuff online, and then if it gets on the radio, great. That'll hopefully drive people back online to find you and become a fan. All right, well, took a week off, and now you're all light on the questions here. Ooh, here's one. Sorry, Romo, I missed this one earlier. Any tips on recording accordion and vocals at the same time? What type of mic or processing can I use to eliminate bleed as much as possible? Don't try to use processing to eliminate bleed. You're just going to mess up the sound. I would ask for something like that, accordion and vocal. I'd say try some stuff, but it might be better to do them separately. Or if you're going to do them together, then do what I talked about on the acoustic, where you have a vocal mic down below. Same thing, vocal mic down below a little bit, facing up at the voice, and then one or two mics on the accordion, up facing down. That will help a little bit with bleed. But no, there's no processing. There's no way to magically remove bleed. It's not a thing that can be removed. It's something that happens at the source. So if you really don't want the bleed, then record it differently, or record them one at a time, or just live with the bleed. It might not be as bad as you think it is. What was your favorite NAMM booth that amazed you? I'll be honest, nothing amazed me. So, I wasn't there to look at toys, so I really didn't look at very many booths. So, sorry. Joe, do you need a submix for every instrument? You don't need a submix for anything, but I do. I have everything in my mix. If you go look at my Mix Together series, everything in my mix is going to a submix bus. So usually it's drums, bass, electrics, acoustics, vocal, background vocal, keyboards. Those are kind of my main buses, and I might make more if I have a string section. I might have a strings bus, that kind of thing. But yeah, to me, it's just a matter of I like to group everything together. Ladra says, how do you market your own music, and how much money do you spend on marketing? I don't spend any money marketing my music. And a big way I market my music is through Home Studio Corner, to be honest. I probably reached the most people with my music from using my music as kind of the foundation of everything I do at Home Studio Corner. So it's not the traditional way of music promotion, but it's kind of the way things are. You know what I mean? With the world being as noisy as it is, finding new, unique ways to create value and get listeners for your music is kind of the name of the game. Let's see, recording. This is from Nilansh. Recording acoustic guitars with a pencil condenser microphone. Your views and experience. Yeah, I think it's great. I used, if you look over my shoulder, you can't really see them, but there's two pencil mics over there that I used to stereo record some acoustic guitar recently, which I know on a recent episode I said I hadn't done that in years. Well, I did recently, and it was fun and cool. You get a little more detail with pencil condensers sometimes, and sometimes they're easier to adjust and get in close to the guitar. So yeah, I think they're great. Glenn says, with your songwriting, do you keep all your ideas and then filter them through at a later date? Or filter through them at a later date, or do you pre-filter your ideas to know which ones to move into recording and demoing? Good question. For me, if I have an idea for a song, I might write it down or record it on my phone just so I hopefully don't forget it. But once I start writing a song, I usually almost always try to finish it, so that it is a finished song when I get up. And then those songs will be filtered just if I enjoy playing them. And then eventually, if I'm going to record them, if I have an abundance of songs, which I sometimes do, I'll play them I'll record just basic versions and play them for some people. And they'll say, yes, this one's great. No, I don't like this one. And kind of just filter it down from there. Which is what I did when I wrote 50 songs for one album. I picked 36 that I really liked. And my wife and my buddy Joel and a few other people, really just those two, essentially whittled it down to the final 13. And there were some they didn't want to keep that I did want to keep, but mostly I kind of followed and trusted their advice. Excuse me. Egbert says, I may have to record a school choir. How do the kids monitor it? big speakers? What about bleed and phase? Some places will provide headphones for every kid. That's hard to do. Some places have a tiny little radio transmitter, and then all the kids get a little radio that they plug their own headphones into so they can hear it. But probably the thing I've done even here when I've recorded a bunch of kids is just have the music playing somewhat quietly. There will be bleed, but who cares? You don't hear the bleed, you hear the kids, and then in the final mix, you just hear the kids and the mix. And yes, there's bleed, but who cares? It doesn't mess up the mix. Again, a lot of questions about bleed. I think we're a little too bleed focused. Who cares if there's bleed? You probably won't hear it in the mix. So, boom. Because the thing that's bleeding is what the mix is going to sound like, right? So that mix is going to be louder than whatever little bit of bleed is getting picked up by the microphones. Is it better to render tracks with lots of plugins to an audio file for mastering, or best to leave it as is for editing? Michael, I think you're confusing mixing and mastering. For mastering, I have a final stereo mix that I send. So there are no plugins. I'm sending an actual WAV file. If you're talking about doing that before mixing, I don't see, unless you're running out of computer processing, I don't see any reason to render for the most part. I mean, you could say rendering kind of cleans the decks and makes it cleaner looking, but I never do. Any unique ideas to meet and network with local people? Jordan, it's a good question, and I think you know the answer. I would ask you, Jordan, if you're still here, what do you think? Leave an answer in the chat, and then I'll tell you what I think after that. Paul says, did you check out the Slate, the new interface? No, I walked by the booth briefly, and then someone else told me kind of about the interface. Don't know. Like I said, I wasn't there to check out gear. You guys keep asking about gear. I'm not going to have an answer. Johnny says, recording a 10-piece jazz group in my tiny studio. I plan to cut 2 instruments at a time and the rhythm section later at church. Do you have advice? It's interesting you wouldn't start with the rhythm section. That'd be the only thing that kind of goes up as interesting is, seems like rhythm section should be one of the first things you record if everyone has to play to the rhythm section. But if you can make it work, I'm curious what would you be recording first, and what would they play to? So I may flip the order, get the rhythm section down, and then go the other way. But again, Johnny, you know what you're doing, so I might have missed something there. Studio Dude, yes, I will post these. I post these every week. They're posted under the Ask Joe Gilder playlist. But yeah, they'll go to my Facebook page once I've got them uploaded. Let's see. Best microphone for acoustic guitar and vocals under $200. Any microphone under $200 will sound great. Any microphone over $200 possibly might sound better, but just find one you like and stick with it, or find somebody who you like their recordings and uses them. I mean, I've used the CAD mics, makes an M179 that I think is a great all-around mic. It's a little dark. The Rode NT1A is fabulous. And then all the Shure mics and the AKGs and the, there's just so many. Can't go wrong. I really believe that. How do you get background vocals to blend smoothly? I'm talking about the opposite of what you normally want to do, which is EQ to create separation. To get them to blend smoothly, big thing is I bus my background vocals to a single bus and I process them together, sometimes using surprisingly heavy compression on the whole, which makes them kind of mush together. I'd have to know more specifics to give you any other specifics. Paul says, I've never done vocal comping. I just try to capture complete performance. Am I missing out? No, Paul, you're awesome. I used to do the whole record 5 takes of vocals and then comp them together, which means going through and listening to all 5 and picking the best ones. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's still the way many a record are made. But I don't like it. It seems like, singing 5 takes wears me out, and I'd prefer to just get it right the first time. So for me, I'll sing a few takes until one feels really good, and then I'll listen to that one, and when I come across a part that I didn't sing as well, I'll just rewind and punch that in until I have a full take. Is this a little bit probably too minimalistic? Sure. Will it work for everyone? No, but man, I think it works. If you can make it work, I think it's a great way to go. Saves a ton of time. Johnny, you're saying the horns will be playing along to a MIDI scratch track because you ran out of space. Yeah, I get that. I think I would just I think I would still do the rhythm tracks before the real rhythm tracks before I brought anything else in. But if the timing doesn't work, then obviously as long as they're all playing to something that's locked in time, you'll be good. Sorry, I'm trying to see if... I don't see that Jordan responded. He might have left. Sam's here. What's up, Sam? Sam and I hung out. Sam Knack is legit, and we hung out quite a bit at NAMM a lot. Sam, that was awesome. Thanks so much. He's saying, how do you do punches when you're by yourself? I always struggle with this. So for me, I've done it a couple ways. So I tend to just, when I'm recording myself, I tend to just do it in this room. So I don't go in the other room just because it's just annoying to do. And I usually, I've got the little fader port. I don't know if that's coming through on the camera. Usually I'll use the record button on there to punch in and punch out. Only thing about that is that button has a click to it. So sometimes the click comes through the recording. So you got to do a little clever editing or timing on the punch to get it in. I have done it before when I'm playing guitar. The fader port has a foot pedal, a foot switch jack in there. So I'll plug in just my sustain pedal. And when you tap it, it engages and disengages record. So if I'm doing a guitar part, I really just need to punch in that 2 bars that I messed up. And I'd rather just do it on the fly than like set up, punch in and punch out points and all that stuff. That just taps it in and out. So my hands are free to just tap it in and out. That's kind of cool. I haven't done that in a while. But that's worked well, and it's just kind of a feature built into the fader port. So that's what I do. So Jordan is back with an answer about he's asking about networking and meeting people locally. He says, all I have come up with is going to local shows, which I find normally the bands are already working with someone, and I put in a coffee house yearly to promote my studio. I guess you mean you put like a poster up or something. I will say, so it's funny that Sam's here. So Sam's been doing music in LA for like 20 years. And he knows walking around the NAMM show we take about 3 steps and then we'd stop and meet somebody that he knows. Or we'd walk by somebody and he'd say, that's so-and-so who played this on that. Or that's so-and-so who wrote this song for this person. And it was almost comical how he just knew everybody. And if you were to ask Sam, and he's in the chat, maybe he'll tell you, and maybe he'll agree, or maybe he'll say, no, I'm completely wrong. But Sam also has gone to the NAMM show every year for, I would imagine, years and years and years. And also probably goes to a lot of industry events and meets other studio owners and other musicians and does collaborations and meets people at his church that are musicians and kind of talk. So I think it's just going to shows, I think, is great, but other like industry events and just any place where you can go, if you've got a friend who records people, just go hang out. Maybe you'll connect with one of them, and then that turns into something else. I think putting yourself out there consistently over time, which is something I struggle to do with very well either, will certainly help. All right, that's all the time I've got for this week. Thanks for watching, listening, being here. I'll be back next week. See you then.